Welcome back to Street Writers.
It's 10 minutes of writing motivation, inspiration, and activation.
Listen, we got a big audience out there. It's bigger than the 6 or 5 that we started with. It's about 6 times than that. So a little favor from those of you listening, maybe first time, whatever. Throw us a star or 5, you know, like give us
5.
a little
Definitely
5.
go for
Throw
the
us 5. Give us a little review. It all helps. People look at that stuff, and if you're here, and if you've been here a couple of times and you like it, and it's the cost of 0 to do it, and it would really help us. So please, if you get a chance, just throw a quick review on there.
And thank you for the props in advance. Take a swing at this.
These are the tips, tricks, and sleight of hand to power up your pencil and percolate your brain.
I thought a good tip to talk about is to avoid cliches.
Yes.
And we think about cliches, especially very often. I know from a lot of the ad work we've done,
right,
from a visual point of view.
Right.
We're always talking to art directors and avoiding the obvious in visuals.
Right.
Innovation, brainstorming. Everybody comes out with a light bulb.
Right.
How many times do we see this? But within language, it's equally important, and I think even more important because you can let it go in a simpler way.
Right.
And I've done this myself, and I've seen other writers do it, where it's easy as pie.
Sure.
It's white as snow.
Right.
And it's, I'm communicating it quickly. Mm-hmm. But no less than George Orwell, which we'll name drop him, maybe get him on the podcast, said, never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you're used to seeing in print. And I think it's lazy language.
Yeah.
And more importantly, I think from a reader's point of view or listener's point of view, you gloss over that stuff.
You do,
right? Easy as pie. Okay, I registered that, but I've moved on.
Right.
And so it's important from a writing point of view,
right,
to create different language. And one way to do this is be mindful of what you're writing.
Yeah.
And then grab that phrase.
Right.
Grab that white as snow.
Right.
Write it down on another sheet or whatever, and then start writing the alternatives.
Yeah.
Write them out until you find that language that is yours and refreshes. Not get to something so complicated.
Right.
As pure as, a vermilion drift in the Russian Siberian, horizons or whatever. But just something that gives it more of what is you.
Right, right. And we're trained to, communicate and convey, so that's what cliches have a reason to exist, and it's a checkoff. It's just kind of a code. Like, this is, I want to say that's as clear as a bell.
Right.
That kind of stuff. But I think, again, that's the point of this show, is that writing's not easy.
No.
So you should be aware of anything that's easy when you write. I mean, you need to know that if you're on a roll and you're just belting out cliches and stuff, go ahead and belt them out. But like you just said, go back to them and evaluate them and stuff.
Because what you're thinking you're doing, which is, I'm clearly communicating and I'm getting my point across in a rapid fashion.
Right.
I don't think you actually are.
No.
I think because of that laziness of the language, or the fact that everybody kind of gets it, I think your audience, your reader, I think they'll just gloss right over it.
And I think not only will they gloss over it, they'll punish you.
Yeah.
Like if I'm reading a novel and I see, needle in a haystack, then I'm thinking, wait, it takes you out of the magic of that story.
Yeah.
You could be in a World War II story, you could be in a science fiction or wherever, and then you see a cliche, and you say, oh yeah, I forgot the writer was doing this.
Sure.
And that just throws, and the flip side of it is when somebody puts in the time to come up with a simile or a metaphor, something like that that's brand new, you could fall in love even more.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I kind of find that there are people who have talent beyond belief to come up with descriptions and stuff. And I always say I'm not a good descriptive writer. And I think there are actually two choices here. If you wrote, it was as white as snow, or, it's as clear as a bell and stuff, go ahead and write it, that first draft and stuff. But then when you go back, if you feel it's worth investing
Yes.
in,
Right.
then go ahead and come up with something that's amazing. If not, then just say it was white.
Right.
You know, it's like
David Quinn said this a couple episodes ago. Right now,
Right.
fix later. Right.
Yes.
So get that down.
Yes.
But go back in.
Right.
And I think once you start doing this,
Right.
it starts to then move to other places where you might be doing cliched approaches to things beyond simply the use of the language, but the way you're positioning things.
Right.
All victims are innocent. All
Yes.
politicians are corrupt.
Right.
Everything within that, there's nuance, and people appreciate that.
Yeah. And to your point earlier, though, you may be writing a novel, you may be writing a screenplay, whatever it is. You do have to make decisions, and so you may feel that this. I wrote this cliche. I want to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, you may not be able to talk about spend a whole paragraph on how white something is.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make the choice of, okay, I'm going to just go straight with this. I'm just going to say it was white, and you're going to make that choice a million times throughout. But the one choice you can't make is to leave in the lazy language, because you'll pull your reader out of the experience and
That's
that
exactly
magic.
it. Exactly it. All
And
right.
then we're done. That's
We're
as
done.
clear as a bell,
Yes.
Dan.
Got a tip to share? Send it to streetriders.podcast@gmail.com. They beat us to the punch.
Admiring the craft or just being jealous of it.
I don't know if I could be jealous of this one because of the subject matter.
Right.
Is almost against jealousy. So Tom Junod, who is an amazing writer,
We love him.
and a number of years ago, he wrote an article about Fred Rogers,
Hmm.
Mr. Rogers. And there's a film coming out about him. Tom Hanks plays him. And this article has resurfaced. The language in it is amazing. So he's talking about a book that was being written that Mr. Rogers was supposed to contribute something to.
Right.
The doctors were ophthalmologists. An ophthalmologist is a doctor who takes care of the eyes. Sometimes ophthalmologists have to take care of the eyes of children, and some children get very scared because children know that their world disappears when their eyes close, and they can be afraid that the ophthalmologist will make their eyes close forever. The ophthalmologist did not want to scare children, so they asked Mr. Rogers for help, and Mr. Rogers agreed to write a chapter for a book the ophthalmologists were putting together. A chapter about what other ophthalmologists would do to calm the children who came to their offices. Because Mr. Rogers is such a busy man, however, he could not write the chapter himself, and he asked a woman who worked for him to write it instead. She worked very hard at writing the chapter until one day she showed what she had written to Mr. Rogers, who read it and crossed it all out and wrote a sentence addressed directly to the doctors who would be reading it. You were a child once too. And that's the whole opening, that he went for. And the cadence of that, if you're familiar with Mr. Rogers, is very Mr. Rogers.
Yeah. So what writing is knocking you out? Tell us about it at anchor.fm/streetwriters/message. Hit us with your best shot.
It's time to get in the ring with us.
We both have a wonderful friend,
Yes, we
Josh Korda. We knew from advertising, and I was his partner, and you were his partner
I was,
too.
yeah, absolutely.
So he's a brilliant art director who's also a brilliant writer, and he left the business to become
Real.
Yeah, exactly, to find a life. I think. But
exactly.
He is now a Buddhist teacher. He
Yes.
leads a group called Dharma Punks in New York, and he's written and traveled extensively. And brilliant man, still a funny, quirky dude that you could have a laugh
doubt,
with.
yep.
And a while back, he asked if I could help him on to help promote a book he wrote. The book is called Unsubscribe, Opt Out of Delusion, Tune Into Truth.
And it's a great book. I read it. Yep.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
We did this thing where he's a big bicyclist, and in Brooklyn he's kind of famous, and I like to ride. So we strapped up a couple of cameras, and starting from Grand Central, worked our way down to Washington Square Park, and we'd get off the bike, and we would just shoot him at different corners, and we did time-lapse kind of things, and it was this idea we all moved too fast, and he would stand still so you had all this action behind him.
Around him. And initially you were creating this as kind of like a trailer for the book. Yeah.
And then we turned it into a story. And we still talked about the book, but we intercut title cards describing his life. And it's been a very interesting life. We then packaged it as a 2-minute micro documentary. And we've been in advertising and we've sold our soul for many a thing.
Right.
But to say people should hear this, he helps people. So we've gotten into some different festivals. We just found out we got in this other cool festival called the Picasso Einstein Buddha International Film Festival. Mm-hmm. And it says it's the Picasso for the prosperity of art, Einstein for the enigma of science, and Buddha, the bridge of humanity. So we were kind of thrilled to, get it into another festival. I think it's like the 4th or 5th we've got it in. But it also comes back to, you shoot something, you may shoot it one way and then find a story for something else. Again
and again. I mean, you brought that up many times. And it becomes raw material.
Yes.
Right? Anything you're doing there becomes material that from a writing point of view, a storytelling point of view, you can go back in and figure out some different moves to take on it. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us at streetriders.podcast@gmail.com.
Tell your friends to listen and their friends too.
Take it to the streets.
And fight to write.